All right, we're going to get started cleaning these ports up. Now, this is just a preliminary because I'm having to add material in here. So I'm just taking out a little bit around where the intake goes in, because it's a pretty big step right in here. And give it a surface for the epoxy to stick to. And then once we get the epoxy in there and it dries, we'll go back and start shaping. So basically, this is just giving it a surface for the epoxy and take a couple of rough edges off in the floor here and around the bowl some. And I'm using a pretty rough grit paper here. Actually, let me change this one out because it's spinning. These kitchen trays work pretty good for burrs and sanding mandrels there. So you're not trying to polish these things because you need a pretty rough surface for the epoxy to stick to. And it'll stick. You're basically cleaning it out and giving it a surface, and that's about it. Especially on the floor here, because this is where we're at. You see my finger right there? This is where we're having to add material, where that big flat spot is right there. And there's an angle right there at the tip of my finger. And there's another angle right here at the bottom of the seat. So we got two angles there that we're trying to build up to give it a nice radius on the floor there. Because the way it works right now, there's no way that air is going in this side of the valve. It's coming across here and going straight and hitting this side over here, creating a little turbulence in the port right there. And it'll run, but you know, obviously it'd run. That's the way they designed it. There's how many thousands of heads out there like that? You know, thousands and thousands and thousands. But they could be better. That's why we're doing this, for improvement. Yeah, that's better right there. I need to work on this intake right over here, where it's going in and kind of transition, because there's a where it goes in straight and then steps down into the port. So there's like a step right there. It's losing port velocity right there. So we might need, I don't really want to take a lot of material out right there. We'll probably end up filling this up around here too. Let me show you what I'm talking about here. In this area right here, you can kind of see that little step right there where it kind of goes in and drops off. So we'll probably end up, instead of taking this to match it, we'll probably fill this up some right here. Get our port velocity up, because you know it's losing velocity when it goes through this size here and then opens up right there. And we're filling up this area in here on the, well, I don't know if you can see that or not. Let me see. You can see where my finger is right there. So on the top of the port here, this is where it flattens out right in my fingers there, if you can see it or not. Right here. But it's still round right here, and then it flattens out as it goes up in here. There's a big flat spot right there. Let me grab my port mold and see if I can show you on there. Let me zoom out a little bit. So this area right here is where it goes in, and then you see it starts to flatten out right here. I mean, it's like flat across here. And then it's going into here, where that big angle is right there. The tip of my thumbnail. That was a sharp point right there. And then there was another sharp point right at the edge of the seat, where the seat sits into the head. There's a little angle right there. We're trying to build that up to give it more of a radius. To see it. And right now, we're gonna have to fill this up too. So we'll smooth it out a little bit more. and get a little surface on the head there, on the floor of the port. And yeah, I could use a flow bench, but I don't have one. But if it's any consolation, I have done thousands of heads before I ever had a flow bench, and they work pretty damn good. You know, you got back before I had a flow bench, I had 1,200 Sportsters making 90 horsepower without a whole lot of work. We're not talking something that blows apart. We're talking a little bit more compression, cams, and porting. With something that doesn't blow apart at 7,000 RPM. So, but the flow bench does help. But you know, what did they do before they had flow benches? They did this and made good power. A lot of it's trial and error if you get down to it. We got a little spot right here that I don't know what the hell that is. It's like another curve right here on this side of the port. That it's almost like a divot right here. Not almost, it is a divot right there on the back side of the port here. So basically on this kind of setup, we're going to have to widen the port out this way in the bowl. Probably have to add a little material right here. We'll see once we get in there to do the floors how we want it shaped, because we're actually going to be moving the floor up. So it's kind of choke off the port like this to get the radius on the floor side. And then we'll end up opening up a little bit on the sides here and a little bit more in the bowl. So we'll see if we need to fill that in or not once we get in there. I guess what I'm saying is anything's going to be an improvement over these stock heads pretty much. We're not trying to take out a lot of material here. You'll actually kill port velocity by doing that. We're trying to build some velocity back up for these, what I consider a poor design port. So I think we got our basic surface here. Pretty good. You see on this side here. Pretty rough right there. Let me get this side over here a little bit more. You're dealing with the epoxy, use a good respirator or mask, because that epoxy is pretty nasty. It'll make you kind of itchy, and you don't want to be breathing that into your lungs there. I don't have epoxy in here yet. I'm just straight up aluminum, and not so much steel, because you ain't taking a whole lot of steel out with this sanding roll here. So we'll have to do the other head and clean these up really good. I'll end up washing them with lacquer thinner and then washing it with soap and water, hitting it with lacquer thinner again really good, or acetone, either one, to clean it up before we put the epoxy in. And I'll have to do the other head. I'll have to rough up the other head before I mix in the epoxy, so I don't know that I'll be doing it tonight. Maybe tomorrow would be more like it for mixing the epoxy, because while I'm mixing it, I need to add a little bit more to the rocker boxes too, as far as where the little divots were in the edges of the rocker box, and I'll just use the same epoxy in there because it's a metal-based epoxy as a filler to fill in them valve covers. So that's it for that one. Let me grab this other head. We'll get started on that one too while we're out here, since our cylinders are drying now. Now it helps if you have both heads together, so you can kind of judge what you're doing on one head versus the other one. And this epoxy is only used on the intake ports here, not on the exhaust, because the exhaust is too hot. It won't handle that epoxy won't handle the heat on the exhaust side. It'd blow it right out. I think this is the head I had yeah, this is the head I did the mold on. It's still got grease in the port there. So since I use grease for that mold release in here, I'll need to especially clean this head here because I need to get all that out of there. As far as any oily residue, carbon, sanding grit, anything. Let's rough this one up a little bit. A little bit more, we should be good here. Yeah, this head's actually better than the other one as far as where that inlet goes in there. There's a little bit of a dip there on the top of the port, but not much. We'll fill that in as well when we do both of them. Yeah, I'm probably going to hit this with some paper after this. Make sure we got a good rough surface. We took some edges out, roughed it up slightly. On this head, I don't want to so much use the burr on it because I don't want to start removing a bunch of metal yet. No, we're not going to use a burr. We're just going to sand it, and then if we need to use a burr later on, we'll use a burr to get it a little bit better. Let me grab some paper here. Some crocus cloth or mechanics sanding roll, whatever you want to call it. And we'll run that through there. A little bit anyway. This stuff's pretty coarse. I think this is like a 40 grit. I think that's what it says on there, 40. Yeah, it feels better there. Let me get this other one. Do it a little bit here. Okay, that ought to be good right there. We'll clean these out tomorrow or later tonight, the rest of the way. And start putting some epoxy in there. They need a good bath, that's for sure. Yeah, it feels pretty good. I think that'll epoxy will stick good to that. So just looking at them, we need to add here, right where the intake goes in, a little bit anyway. By doing that, as air is going in, it's going in like this. Then there's an open space at the very edge of the inlet where it opens up. So we're going to be losing port velocity right there. So we'll need to transfer that in with a little bit of epoxy around where the intake goes in. And then on the floor here, like I said, and I'll try and get better pictures as I go along. And we'll see what happens in the end there. Like I said, I wish I had a flow bench to see and a swirl meter with a velocity probe so I can see where dead areas of the port are. But, you know, after having done 2 valve heads for a really long time, they're all pretty much the same, and it comes down to some stuff works and some stuff doesn't in basic porting. Like the guy that used to sell the porting kits used to say, you know, we're talking a long time ago, careful porting pays off. It's not hog it out and see how it goes, because you actually end up losing power if you do that. You might get lucky, but 9 times out of 10, you lose power. And I've had guys do porting or get porting done somewhere, and you know, bike set up good, all that, and it made power before it had porting, and all of a sudden it's got a big, I don't know how to explain it, it's got a big dip when you go to get into the throttle, and it just kind of falls on its face, and it'll rev up, but it's like really slow to rev up, and it's because damn ports have been butchered. They're just too big. So a basic improvement without adding epoxy in here would be to come in the floor here and put a radius right there where that edge was, and right there at the edge of the seat, because there's an edge right here and an edge about, I don't know how far in that was, one edge right here at the very end of it. I got my finger on it right here. That's still there, but you could go in there and just kind of round that off, radius it a little bit, would help a lot. You know, we're not talking it's going to pick up a ton of power, but it'd be better than coming in there and air hitting this side of the port over here, because they ain't got nothing to go around, because air don't like going around corners. And you got basically 2 corners right here, one there and one right there. Or if you see it on here, there's like one here, one corner right there, and one corner right there. And that's kind of killing it. That airflow, if you think about it, that airflow is going straight across the port here. It's not wanting to go around this, because there's no radius there. It's edge. It's wanting to go and hit this side of the port over here. So you're kind of killing flow all the way around. But, and you know, you don't want these things highly polished either on the intake sides anyway. Exhaust, yeah, sure, highly polished the exhaust side, but not the intakes. Intakes, you want a little bit of a rough surface. You know, I'm not talking super rough, but sure as hell don't need to be polished, because it looks pretty. Well, who can see in there? I can't see in there, but I know if I take a manifold off and I see a polished intake, I know somebody's done screwed it up. Needs a little bit of surface in there. But that's it. We'll slap some epoxy in there tonight or tomorrow. More than likely tomorrow morning sometime. I've got a few other things to do tomorrow, so if we can get the epoxy in there and let it sit for, well, probably 3 or 4 days before I actually get started on it, because it has to set up a certain amount of time before you ever mess with it. And I'm not even going to worry about the exhaust side until I'm actually done with the intakes. And what I'm doing with these is I'm going to put ceramic coat on the combustion chambers and the heads of the valves. So I'll have to blast these with 120 grit aluminum oxide. Same with the exhaust port. I'll be putting the ceramic coat inside the exhaust port itself. So same thing, I'll have to blast the inside of that with 120 grit aluminum oxide after any port work that I do in the exhaust as far as shaping goes. And truth is, I'm not doing a whole lot to the exhaust. It's got a hump right there too. So we'll try and fix that hump going out of there as far as giving it a radius instead of an angle like that. We'll do the radius on that. We'll do the ceramic coat, epoxy on the intakes, and finish the porting on that. And we'll be done when we're done. I'm this far in, I'm not in any big hurry. I tell you what, since I'm on the downhill slope on this one, as far as I know, on the Beamer, as far as the top end goes, and I'm not even doing any chassis crap yet until I get the engine back together, and then have to get started back on the Sportster up there on the lift for the Cafe Racer Sportster. But that being said, and then I got to do the transmission first second gear shift fork on that thing, and I think the front head gasket's starting to leak on that thing, so I got to do it too. But regardless of that, I was looking at something the other night that I remembered it, and I thought it would always be cool to do. Was kind of an Ironhead Sportster replica of XRTT. And what they used to do a long time ago, and I haven't seen one for years. I used to see a guy at a bike show that had one, 30-something years ago. Was they would take Ironhead Sportster and use two front heads on it. So instead of having a front head and a rear head, the rear head would be a front head. So you could pretty much do a lot of work on the ports on those things. Then you'd have to take I know Andrews used to make them, and a couple other people did too. The cams, you'd have to swap the number 1 and number 2 cam in the Sportsters, because your intake would be all the way at the back on number 1 where the exhaust was, and your exhaust would be on number 2, which is where the intake was. And very cool looking setup, kind of like a XR looking thing, but using Ironheads. Because face it, you ain't getting the XR 1000 heads for any kind of money that's cheap. And I want to say I saw one that somebody had done at a bike show one time where they had done Thunder heads, which were basically aluminum heads for Ironhead Sportsters back in the 70s. That were very neat heads. Them Thunder heads looked like an Ironhead Sportster head, but it was aluminum with bigger fins and different size valves in it, and the ports were a lot better, all that stuff. But just an idea, down the road. I don't know that I'll actually do it. I just thought it would be cool. But different project, because then I'd have to come up with a frame or modify a frame to the way I wanted it to. And that's going to take time to get to. But in the future, I got a lot on my plate. We got to build the shop over there yet. As soon as we can get to it, as soon as the ground dries out over there, pretty much. At least I can walk across there now, but it still needs to be filled up with dirt, fill, rubble, whatever, to do it. And I'm just blowing my mouth now, so we'll put this epoxy in here tomorrow. I've already got the epoxy, just need to mix it. And I bought some tongue depressors to use as mixers and applicators for the epoxy. They work good, slightly bigger than popsicle sticks. And make it a little bit easier to get in there and apply more at one time. All right, I got to hit the store, man. You guys take care. Have a damn fine week coming up, and fine weekend and all that stuff. I appreciate you watching. I appreciate you subscribing, and anybody that does a super thanks, you guys, I really appreciate that. It's every time somebody does it, it's really unexpected. It's nice. And you know, you don't have to do that. It's very nice that you do, though. Greatly appreciated, beyond words, really. So thanks. And that's it. You guys have a fine week, man.